Today, we're going to be diving into advanced quoting. Now that you've had a chance to go through the CRM and lead management side of the software, the next step, of course, is taking on that all-important part of the lead management process, which is quoting, and usually the foundational blood of all companies. One of the first things they come looking for in a software platform in order to be able to handle their quoting, improve their quoting processes, and obviously win more leads, which means more jobs, which means more profit. So what we really want to cover today is advanced quoting, how to quote quickly and profitably. It's a fair statement to say that Jobman has an extremely intuitive and flexible quoting system, which means it can virtually handle any way that you currently are quoting. And clients often come to us, and because it's such a foundational part of every business, they will have processes already set up in order to handle that quoting. What we want to be able to show you is a way to get two massive benefits to your company by switching into the Jobman quoting system. The first one is transparency of information, actually having that information do something. If you use a siloed program such as an Excel spreadsheet or something along those lines, whilst it might suit the quoting purposes for your manufacturing business, the information can't do anything thereafter. It's just the quote to the client, and it's just sitting there. One of the foundational benefits of quoting in Jobman is that information can then follow through into the platform. For example, operational hours that you measure in your quote and you quote against, such as assembly, machining, install, dispatch, all those sorts of things, will then flow into the job management system, which we'll be covering in an upcoming webinar. On top of that, materials and services you add directly to the quotes will flow through to the jobs as well, and then can help automate your purchase ordering, reduce the amount of mistakes made with the wrong things being ordered. And certainly foundationally from there, give you access to the most important information that most people are looking for from an ERP, which is how profitable was I? Job costing. It's the foundation of any platform. Now, you can probably ascertain to a degree some of those things from a siloed program like Excel. If you quote $20,000 and you look at your costs at the end of the job, you can roughly know what they are. However, one of the pitfalls in that is it's usually very time consuming to collate that data, whereas Jobman will do it for you automatically. As people are measuring time or your purchase ordering resources, we can apply that estimate versus the actual and start giving you some real life data. And the other thing that often gets missed is all the changes or mistakes that happen in the manufacturing process. So one of the great things about Jobman is because we have a static point at which we can take that quote value and move it into your job values, we are able to then also track anything that goes wrong. For example, a very common thing I hear in manufacturing is that when designers and estimators are creating quotes, they don't necessarily fully understand the complete engineering side of what's about to happen in the build. So they might quote a price on a system, for example, as part of the manufacture, and it just isn't suitable in the real world. So when it actually comes to go do the job, you may then have to go purchase a different system in order to work in with that manufacturing process, and it might be significantly dearer than what was originally estimated. So Jobman is able to give you those numbers. Also, when things get damaged and recut, for example, we can run those through as work orders, and all that information can collate in one place. So that's the first big win, is that transparency, that automation, and obviously having that information in one place and the whole team able to access it and then follow through into your reporting. But one of the secondary big benefits to that, of course, then is the client-facing aspect of our quoting system. So we'll also be covering in quote templates and the ability to email quotes in and out of Jobman with automations around acceptance and that. So that's a big one. Not just producing quotes, but having professional-looking quotes that are easy to produce by anyone in your company once you've set up the system, that can be then sent to your clients in a professional manner. They're accepted, which creates automation and a lot of transparency. So it's an extremely good system. It's very flexible. And the great thing about it is it doesn't have to be used at the absolute maximum capacity at which the software can perform. That's what I'm going to be showing you today. If you are interested in just basic quoting, we've done a webinar previously on that. Please do jump on the YouTube and check that out. It's a very simplistic version of how you can just simply go in if you've just started with the software, add materials, services, labor operations, and really just replicate how you're probably currently quoting, and then move that in and still get a lot of the benefit we were just talking about. What I really want to focus on today is the primary benefit of automation from fast quoting, but not just fast quoting, having those profit-driven numbers in your face while you're producing the quote. So before you've even accepted the job, you should know roughly how much you're going to make. And that is certainly one of the biggest initial wins most companies get bringing in Jobman into their quoting service. So really by the end of this, I hope that you'll have a good understanding of the quote efficiencies using things like products and presets. Are two big fast wins to help companies get quoting quickly. Understanding the difference in the quote between the sections, the items, the components, the elements. Obviously being a very powerful quoting system, it's not just as simplified as just typing in a line item, although you can do that. We have it broken down specifically to give you the maximum amount of control inside your quoting. Obviously then how to create each of those areas so that you can utilize them best for your fast quoting. And then quote templates and where to go for help if you need to help build some professional ones for your business. So today, I'm not going to spend a lot of time in the PPS side of things. I really want to dive into the software and give you a good run through these areas. Like I said, I'm going to take it a little bit slow because where the areas connect seems to be one of the biggest questions we get when people come into the software. And honestly, it's one of the biggest areas that most clients come to us for training. Setting up this right the first time to make sense for your business, and then being able to gain the full benefit of the software by having this done right the first time, obviously is absolutely something we encourage people to reach out for some training or help, because this is so foundational. My hope today is that if I can produce this webinar in such a way that it makes a lot of sense and it's quite clear and understandable, that you might not even have to come to us. You can utilize the information here to really replicate your quoting procedure inside Jobman. And that just helps people get moving even faster, or potentially you might be using the software platform already for, management of jobs, management of leads, capacity, purchase ordering, a lot of different reasons people come to our platform. And you're looking to get the full scale benefit. And really it all starts here. Once you got your quoting down pat, everything else in the software just becomes so much better and so much usable for you. So you can see here, I've just put together a quick template just to give you an idea of some of the different areas and things you can put into your quoting. Obviously, we have fantastic things such as quote introductions, preset templates for your forward-facing quotes to your clients. And then you can see here that the 4 major areas we're going to go into today are present. So we have a section, items, we have some understanding around what is included in each of those items or areas, depending on which way you want to refer to them. And then the things you can put inside, which we call components. So line items, products, operations, even just straight up materials. And then the last part to that we'll be diving into today is the element side, the things inside those that then generate the costing. And that seems to be the big point that people want to see. Once they dive on the platform, they want to be able to produce a quote fast, but also see the information, how they're used to seeing it, and make sure the prices line up. So we'll dive into that today and make sure that all makes a lot of sense. Which is good. The great thing about templates, which is worth noting directly off the bat, is if this is not how you would prefer your clients see the information, a lot of clients prefer a more basic template where they're simply seeing the sections and the items and the inclusions and just a price. They don't need to see everything inside. That's the great thing about Jobman templates. And you can have multiple set up. To drop down, very easy. You can flick between them depending on the client. Some clients will require full quote templates, which have all the inclusions, all the pricing, all the breakdowns. Other clients, you just want to send a basic quote so they can't take it down the road and, rip apart the bits and try and, wangle a better price. For other people, they want a halfway. This is sort of like a halfway between the two where you can see everything. I've got the inclusions in there, so it's really clear what we're quoting on, but we're still just getting that one decent price at the end. So templates, absolutely fantastic, will really help that side of your business. So let's dive in. no point messing around. Let's jump straight into the software. And what I really want to do is I'm going to explain the 4 major benefits of the quoting areas for speeding up your business, especially from a quoting point of view, primarily being products and presets. But I also want to show you where the links lie so that it's really clear if you or someone else in your business is watching this video and you're trying to ascertain your pricing and make sure things line up. How do we best get to those results fastest? And I'm going to work in that order just to make your life really easy so that it should hopefully make a lot of sense. And of course, if there's questions at the end, please do fire them at me. So the first one, the first simplest place to start in the software is setting up what we call your overarch pricing. So under your settings, if you go into your catalog, you'll see a first configurable. And this is an overarch configuration for all of the pricing in your software. And you can see it's broken into several areas, but the main three we want to focus on are labor, materials, and services. So the first point about this is by editing any field in this area, this pricing will now automatically apply to every labor operation I put in the software, every service, and every material. Easy. So that's why this is one of the fastest and easiest ways to get your genuine pricing set up quickly, is to have these organized first. And then I'll show you how to go a little bit deeper so that you can control the pricing. But for most companies, just controlling it here is a great starting point. So labor operations, obviously you're looking at a default charge out rate. For your materials and services, you probably have overhead, wastage, and profit built into your business. Now, so that you've got a nice clear understanding of these, overhead and wastage are linear markups. What I mean by that is if I enter 10% in my overhead here and 10% in my wastage, and that material, as an example, costs $10, and then I apply the overhead and wastage, it will cost me $10 plus 10% for overhead, so 11, plus 10% for wastage, $12 on each. So that's how these two fields work. Overhead and wastage are just linear markups. Nice and easy. The use case for them, which is a common question we get, is allowances above and beyond the cost of the materials. The cost of the material is the material from your supplier or the service. If you're for contractors or electrical work or anything you get done as part of the project management of your manufacturing. However, that's really just the raw cost plus GST, if GST is applicable to your country. So plus tax, I should probably say. What it doesn't cover is it doesn't cover handling. It doesn't cover the fact that someone's going to come into your business, the truck's going to drop off, they've got to pull it off the back of the truck, and they've got to organize it. It doesn't cover any potential wastage that may get involved with the production of that material. For example, sheet materials like steel and boards you lose a little bit to offcut, and depending on how expensive those things can be. For example, stone is extremely expensive material to work with, and every time you lose a percentage cut on that is a fairly large amount of money. So by having a wastage allowance, it allows you to cover that. Other things probably don't have a wastage allowance. For example, hardware and things like that really don't have a wastage allowance. You buy 10,000 screws, 10,000 screws. That's it. You're not really throwing too many screws out. Hinges, panels, all those sorts of things don't really require a wastage amount. So one of the great things about this system is because we can go a little bit deeper into the system, we don't necessarily have to set overhead and wastage up here, but you can. And by doing it, it's a set and forget. Don't worry about it. It's just going to automatically apply to all your materials and services. The second part is profit margin. Now, this is a very, very common question we get. Why profit margin, not profit markup? For the difference, just so that we're nice and clear, profit markup is like a linear markup. Same as overhead and wastage. If I say 20% markup, I mean times the cost by 20%, and I get that price. So if it costs me $10 and I want a 20% markup, it's $12. The reason why Jobman uses profit margin is because it's a far more accurate, scalable, and profitable way to manage your business. Profit margin by difference is give me the sum total of the cost, which is the cost of the material plus tax plus overhead plus wastage, and then tell me how much to sell that item for to make the amount of money I want to make. So before you've even started with Jobman, one of the very first things that you'll benefit from is rather than simply having this chalked up allowance rate, you'll have the ability to come in here and dictate what that margin should be. So as an example, 20% profit margin is the equivalent of 25% profit markup. There are calculators online. You can go jump if you want to reverse engineer those numbers. But the reason we do it is because it's the safest way to manage your business. If you discount an item, and let's say you've got a 20% markup, and you discount, say, 10%, the static inclusions in that item can't change. It's not going to cost you less. You can't buy it for less. The labor to manufacture that item isn't less. So if you're discounting at 10% and you're working on a markup, it's ripping out all of those costs to a level where you're probably not even profitable on them. And for a lot of companies, that's the first thing they don't realize. So one of the great benefits of Jobman is by putting in that 20% profit margin, for example, you can see that discounting, whilst will impact that costing, live, it will show you what that will do to the end result. And that's fantastic. You can see that. So before you've even started putting jobs out there, you should know what you're going to make. So that's the difference between those three. And setting them up here is easy and it will apply to everything in your software. The second part, of course, is the labor operations. Now, by recommendation, we recommend that you use a default charge out rate and don't touch these areas. For most manufacturers, we don't work in the service industry. We're not mechanics, for example, in that we have a cost of labor and then we sell that labor. So every hour the mechanic works on your car, it might cost $100, say, as an overhead rate, but we put 50% markup on it and we sell it for 150, and that's what the client gets charged. We're not a service-based industry. The point to labor operation costing is to be included into the manufacturing process so that there's an allowance built for that manufacture to be nice and safe. So the reason why we don't recommend using markups is because what it will actually do by default is it will trick your system to a degree. If you have $100 at cost and you sell it out to 150, and I put 1 hour of assembly onto a quote. When a team goes and measures that, if it takes them an hour, that's great. If it takes them an hour and a half, Jobman's still going to say you're profitable because you're telling Jobman it's costed $100, but you've allowed up to $150. That's not the information you want. In order to improve your productivity and to improve your business and become more profitable, the very first thing we want to do is we want to be able to measure time in an accurate scale, time versus time. So at $140 or $130, $150, whatever your default charge out rate is, and that's an overhead for your entire business per hour, Jobman will give you the best result. 1 hour versus 1 hour. If it takes them an hour and a half, I want you to see the impact that's had on your profit. And that's why that's there. Now, that's just a recommendation. You don't have to take that recommendation, of course. You are more than welcome to go in and set that up however you would like, but that is the absolute best way of using the software. Now, the second part to that is, as I said, not every material or service is the same. For example, hardware probably doesn't have wastage allowance to it, whereas your sheets and boards might. So the second area you can impact that overarch pricing is inside settings, categories. And categories in your catalog allow you to do two things. The first one is if it's anything to do with sheets, i.e. something that's purchased in a square meter rate, but handled in a sheet rate or board rate, this is where you can turn that on. I'll cover that later in a different topic. But the second thing you can do is you can modify and change the numbers from the overarch. And for reference, if I leave something blank, it simply uses the default. So you can see on my default, I've got 0% overhead and 0% wastage because I want to handle that at a material category level. Doesn't make sense to simply apply 12% wastage to all of my materials. But for grain board particularly, because it can only be cut one way to keep the grains in line, the pattern or the grain in line, I have quite a high wastage amount. So I set this here. What it'll do is it'll take the default charge out profit margin, which is 20%, and then it will apply 5% overhead and 12% wastage only to items in my categories, items in my catalog that are of the category for this amount or this type. So you can also have a different area for example, plane. You can have differings for things like hardware. I might not have any wastage whatsoever, but this is how you can drill down even further and really get the best out of your software. So one overarch just control everything, and then you can go down that next step and absolutely modify those numbers. The second part to that, of course, is labor operations. So whilst a default charge out rate might make sense for most of your business, there might be certain operations where you have to charge a little bit more, either because you contract out the operations themselves, for example, contract installs, contract draft people, detailers, something like that, or simply because they are a higher cost overhead to your business. And the way you can do that is under settings, jobs, operations. Same thing again. By default, all of these operations will draw from my standard. However, if I come in here and I override any of those numbers, now every time Jobman adds an operation to a quote, whether it be part of a product or directly, it will use this number instead. So that's your first two steps. Nice and easy. That'll take you 2 minutes. Once that's done, you've already started setting up the foundation of the software for the quoting. And the most common question I get is why I've produced a quote side by side in Jobman to what I currently do. Why are the numbers different? That's probably why. It's either because you haven't scaled your margin to equal your markup on your profit, or you haven't set up your overhead allowances and wastage properly, and therefore one is going to be less than the other. So a quick fix there. All your quotes going forward will now follow those new numbers, which is awesome. The second part, of course, is then having a look at our catalog. So once you start entering some materials, you can see I've just got some nice waste bins here as part of our kitchen manufacturing from Hayfley, and some services. We're starting to get some things we can add into the software for the quoting. And this is the simplest way. This is the basic quoting. Just add materials, services, operations. All of that's pretty easy, and that's covered in other webinars. What I want to focus on today is the true superpower of the software, and that is products and presets. Now, products for reference are an inclusion of parts which measure to style items, labor, operations, and services. So it's a culmination. It does not have to be all. It can be some, but the idea is that I can build one product and use it over and over and over and over again in quoting. Now, the reason why Jobman is so powerful for that is because in most companies, when you manufacture, it's virtually always bespoke, which means every time you do a quote, it's going to be totally different. So Jobman is designed to both understand and handle that. Rather than you have to produce 3.5 million variations of products, Jobman has built a system in which you can produce one product. That product uses parts, which are what we call parametric or scalable. So as I make the product bigger, longer, higher, it will increase the price because Jobman understands how those materials then interact with the pricing. We also then use style items to interact with the different parts so that you can tell Jobman what the pricing should be. So in that way, we can take one product and we can cover millions of variations. And that's the superpower of Jobman. Now, this product concept, often people see this live, or they've seen it in webinars or YouTubes we've done previously. And a lot of people say to me, oh, it's great if you're a cabinet maker. That makes a lot of sense. I can build this base cabinet here. You know, I can affect what the doors are made out of, what the carcass is made out of, what the hinges are. I can make it bigger, longer, smaller, wider, stronger. And it makes sense that the pricing will change. That's not my industry. How can I use products? Exactly the same way. And I've seen this utilized over and over and over again by many different companies in a lot of different areas in order to really get the best out of the software. You think about steel bench tops, modifiable parts, machining. Machining is generally, building a thing like a motor or a fence with a motor is simply a culmination of parts, the operations designed to make them, potentially some services, and then some materials as well. So that's the beauty of our products. They're very usable across a lot of platforms. And the best thing about them is once you've built a couple, they're very easy to duplicate and then tweak and change for slight differences. For example, and I'm going to use kitchen example simply because it's the most straightforward example for most people to understand. We've all got kitchens and bathrooms and laundries and en-suites, even if you don't work in that manufacturing sector. When you look at it, you know what it is. You can see it. You can break it down. You can open it. It's got a door. You can see the hinges. It's got handles. Might have a shelf, it's got a carcass. All the parts then make sense. So converting that information to your industry becomes a lot easier. So you can see inside this product, I have what's called components or parts, and I'll get into components in a moment, but essentially parts. A base one door has a back, it has a bottom, has a door, has two ends, has a handle, and has some hinges. Fantastic, easy, nice and straightforward. That all makes sense. All of those are parts to that product. You can also then add in and apply labor. So you can see here, I've got labor operations, and based on our current efficiencies, making one base one door cabinet takes about 25 minutes to assemble. There's about 12 and a half minutes of cutting, edging, final drafting, and site install. So this is a very simplistic example, but it should make a lot of sense. And you can see here that by setting up those default rates, Jobman's already doing its job. Jobman's coming in and saying, hey, yep, there we go. That was our default charge out rate for our labor. There's the difference with the assembly. And these are our overhead wastage, and profit margins applied. So the beautiful thing by using those overarches, you don't have to go into our system and modify every material, modify every product every time you want to make a price change. You change it in one area and it will change everything in your software. So that's part one. Part of that you'll notice is that this cabinet has this product has a size. The size of the initial product itself is fairly irrelevant, although putting something in that makes pretty sense as a good standard will help you when you're just judging the numbers. And what I mean by that is Jobman is smart enough, even at this point, even though we've just produced the product, to actually tell you based on these numbers using what we call the standard inclusions, and I'll show you those in a second, with our profit aggregated, what would this sell for? So the beauty of this is even as you're producing products in the system, if you want to get a good idea as to whether or not they're going to match up with your pricing, most people would have a pretty good idea of what that looks like at a base level. And then what happens next is how we increase those amounts to make it premium, deluxe, etc. Different materials, different schedules, and how that then affects the price. But the good thing about the system is it will give you a default price to work with. So you can look at this and go, yeah, you know, base one cab in just white melamine and a basic handle range with simple hinges, $300. Makes a lot of sense. Nice and easy. So that's the first half of products. Now, once you start building some products in the system, and if you've taken advantage of our seeded sites, you will find that most industries that we produce seeded sites for do have some products inside them already. I think the cabinet making industry has the largest number. I think it starts at about 72. So you'll have quite a good library to work with. And the best thing about these right now is they work off the bat. So rather than you have to go in and start producing these as soon as you get the software, you can start quoting using the products we have, knowing they will work. And all you've done so far is modify the percentages to make it suit your business. If you're in an industry where there isn't a lot of seeded sites, there will be a couple of examples there so that you can copy them and start to work with them and really run through them. There's a lot of documentation around this area on how to build them, but just keep in mind, these are very flexible. And the main benefit they will give you then is automation. We can use products over and over and over again to cover thousands of different operational differences. So that's part one. Part two to products is components. Now, you do not have to use components in our system. You can simply go into a product, create a product, add a part, add some labor. You're off, no problems. So if your product, for example, is a top, you produce tops, whether it be bench tops or tops in steel or tops, whatever you make them for. So for you, your products are very easy. They're height of the product, by the width of the product, by the depth of the material. That's it. And then you have operations for cut, edge, assemble or dispatch, and CNC coding. And that's it. That can be a product. The beauty of producing that product for your company now is when you add that to a quote, you can stretch it, which means you'll increase the price. You can change the material. So it might be a base, or it might be a deluxe material or a premium material. And as that price goes up, based on the width, height, width, and depth of that product, it will increase the price. So by producing that one product, you've now been able to use that and scale that in your quoting a millionfold. And that's the benefit. So they do not have to be complicated. They can be quite straightforward, but very useful. However, components add that extra layer of automation to your system, where you have what I would consider to be commonality in parts. So if we take our base one door, for example, it has a back. That back is a part, and that back is applicable to virtually every cabinet I make, except for an upper cabinet. So rather than have to produce these products and then go into every single one of those cabinets and make a back for each of them and enter the information and, 100% of product width by 100% of product depth by material depth, rather than do that, 100 times if I have 100 products, I can simply build one component called a back and link that out to all of my product types. And I've linked this one in its example here so that you can see that this particular one is applicable to all of these cabinets. So the minute I produce a product and I give it the product type, either base cab, drawer cab, tall cab, or upper cab, it will apply this part. So again, Jobman's really helping you get a lot of automation into your quoting by making it as easy as possible to massive scale your parts. And you can use this concept for virtually any production or product management in our system. Components are extremely powerful. Now, what are the key elements to a component? The key elements to a component obviously what product types does it apply to, how many there is as a default standard. Keep in mind you can update this product to product. So for example, base 1-door cabinet has 1 door. A base 2-door cabinet has 2 doors. So I can still use the idea of adding a door to every single one of my base cabs. However, I then go into each of those base cabs and simply update the quantity of the doors to 2 and change the parametrics to be 50% of product width rather than 100%. Sounds pretty complicated, but once you sort of get into it, you start using it and looking at it and playing with it, it will make a lot of sense. And that's why we put a lot of this information in here, for you to make your life easier. So you've got some examples to work with. Like I said, out of the box, a lot of this will work already. So you don't need to do this setup. We just want to explain how it works. So if you want to expand on the list in future, you've got the power to do so. So that's part one. What product types does it apply to? What quantity is it? And then what are the parametrics, or what is the scaling of those parts within those products? So for example, the back is nice and easy. The measurement of the back is 100% of the product length by 100% of the product width. By telling Jobman that now, when I put a cabinet in and it's 700 by 500 by 800, if I change it to 750 by 500 by 800, it will automatically scale this part. Therefore, it will increase the price based on the extra square meterage required. So that's how these are become parametric. The parts themselves stretch, which is why the default size of the product doesn't make a lot of difference. You can have it as whatever you want to have it as. Like I said, use a generic default that makes sense for most of your work, and then you can update it inside the quote. The last part, which is probably the last important part that I want to show you today of how to calculate your pricing so that we can put all this together in a quote, is what type of component is it? Now, what we generally do when we set up these types, when we set up the types, not what they are, is you can tell Jobman what this part will be. And parts can be anything. They can be labor. So going back to our benchtop product, our nice simple height with depth, our labor operation in there will be cutting. So if I want to add a part to my product, I simply come in here and I add component and I add the labor and I say cutting and I say 10 minutes or 12 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever that may be. And that now will apply that labor operation to all of those products. You can add materials directly in. So quite often it's not just style items or schedules. You'll also be using direct materials. If we use the example of the gate with the automated machining, which allows the gate to open and close, that box itself is probably a standardized material. Depending on the gate, you will generally sell the same thing over and over and over again. So whilst you want the gate itself, which is the product, to be parametric, because as the gate gets bigger or smaller, we want the price to increase or decrease. You'll have labor operations around the cutting, the filing, the sanding, the blasting, powder coating, whatever your process may be, all of those built into that product. So it's really easy. You can add the gate, stretch it, change the material. I've got a price. Every single time that device will also have an appliance, and that appliance is designed to open and close the gate. So I may as well just link that directly to a material schedule. That way, every time I add that product to a quote, I don't need to think about it. I know it's automatically going to come in. And there's 100 use cases for this. One of the most common ones I would see, for example, in cabinet making is adjustable legs. You buy one type of adjustable legs, depending on the cabinet, there's 4 involved in the cabinet. So you may as well just add 4 of that exact material every time you produce this product. The most common way you will set up components or parts, though, will be using what we call style items. Style items are the way our software tells your quoting what the price of that material should be based on a schedule. So is it baseboard? Is it grain board? Is it 2-pack painted? Is it high quality sheen? As I move up that scale, I want the price of that product to increase. And you're starting to see how just by having products and components with parts in them and styles, all I need to do is produce a very small amount of products in Jobman, and I can make a lot of variations. And that's why Jobman is so good at bespoke manufacturing. So setting up your components just automatically populates your products. However, like I said, you do not have to utilize that functionality. You can simply add products, put parts in them. They'll work just fine. The last quick thing I'm going to cover before we move on is the most common question I get is, okay, so we've put some labor operations into our products. We start running Jobman. We start getting some job costing. We start understanding our processes. And we've noticed that every single time we quote on a job, our assembly is too small. There's not enough of being allowed. Our team is always running over. How do we fix that? Very easy. You can export your entire products list. And when you do so, it will export all the products in your list with all the relevant operations. You simply go in, tweak the numbers, suck this back in, and that will automatically update all your products. So going forward, all of your quotes will be updated, all your time allowances will be increased or decreased. Obviously, part of the software is to improve your efficiency. So we want to get you to a point where you might start with 15 minutes of assembly, but over time using Jobman, you improve your processes, you get more efficient, and that number comes down, which means your quoting gets keener, or you leave it the same and simply make more money. That's completely up to you, but that's one of the first primary benefits, and it's very easy to handle, and we expect you will do this quite often, especially to begin with. First couple of times, you'll let the system run with the products as is. You'll run some jobs, and then you'll quickly start ascertaining your numbers, and that's how you can easily modify the system to handle that. So that's products, components, overarch pricing, defaults, and category areas taken care of. So you've got the majority of your pricing ready to go for your quote. The last part is, okay, Cam, I get that I've got parts. How now do I tell those parts what my options are? So this can be anything. This, like I said, this can be boards, this can be sheets of steel, this can be handles, this can be hinges, this can be componentry, whatever it is that might change in that product. Rather than have to build a product for every different type of inclusion, I can use style items to then tell the parts what to price on. And the key in our system is an area called quote pricing. So under your catalog, under your materials, you will hopefully, if you have one from the seated site or not, it's pretty easy to set up. You'll set up a brand and you'll call it quote pricing. And the reason we have quote pricing is because when quoting, typically most manufacturers are not interested in the exact SKU of the material. For example, metal prices go up and down every day based on London Exchange. Boards, there's 13,500 board options from just one supplier in Australia, and there's 3 or 4 main suppliers. Handles, I think there's somewhere in the vicinity of about 22 million options for handles. So when producing a quote, we don't want you to have to go in and then take each of those parts and say, well, every time I make a quote, I've got to go looking for the exact SKU on the exact material on the exact. That's what takes the time, and that's what slows things down. And obviously, the slower your quoting process, the more time you're losing to run your business, but more importantly, the less leads you're winning. The longer it takes to go back to clients, the less quotes you're getting out the door, the less jobs you're getting, the less income. And this is certainly one of the first things we want to fix for your company. So instead, we utilize what is commonly called a schedule system. We call it styles, but most companies refer to it as a schedule system. So rather than say the exact board for carcass is Laminex, I'm just using them as an example, or Polytech or Worldwide Timbers, SKU 1234, whiteboard, and I buy it for exactly $18 a square meter. Instead of doing that, because you would have to produce 4 or 5 options for that, for each of your different suppliers, we say we have a quote pricing option which covers all of our whiteboard, and it's $15 a square meter. Easy. That way, when I'm in a quote and I have those parts, such as the back, end, sides, shelves, example, that are linked to the style item carcass, and carcass is then linked to these options, I can drop and use the drop down to choose between these options and immediately change the price. So I've got 2 really standardized options here for my carcass. It either comes in whiteboard or blackboard. They're the most 2 common. You might have a third option, which could be color. You might be in the steel industry, so you have a general price for your 5 mil cold, your 3 mil cold, 7 mil, etc. These are your drop-down options. And by telling Jobman what these things are made out of, I'm impacting the pricing in the quote. The beauty of this is, as you can see, I've only got about 30 quote pricing options here. Most companies we deal with would only probably have 30 to 40. That's it. So when it comes to managing your quoting going forward, you don't have to worry about 37,000 catalog items. So long as you keep this pricing up to date, if you get a major increase from your board suppliers, you might want to come in here and change a few of your board prices. But as long as you keep this up to date on a fairly regular basis, once every 3 months or 6 months, you will now keep all your quoting up to date all the time. And I only have to manage 30 items. And these style items can be used to manage virtually any part in your products. So for example, I have boards here. I have hardware options. I have draw runner sets. I have handle options, basic, premium, standard, finger pull. These are my most common options for handles. When someone walks into my showroom, we don't go through and pick out the handles at that point. We're just producing a quote. So what we do is you say, you want that board there, it's the base range, 750, that board there, it's 15, that board there, it's 25, or you've got some deluxe premium over here at 60. This follows that concept because at quoting, that's the information we have. And then when we go into the job itself, that's when we choose and pick the actual hardware the client is going to want. So this will speed up your process massively. And it isn't just used for cabinet makers and commercial joiners, or shop fitters. We have thousands of companies that utilize this concept in many, many, many industries: steel, fencing, boating. You can use the concept over and over because it makes sense. I have a product, it has parts, they're parametric. And the last part is just tell it what it's made out of. And by having those parts linked to these style items, I have virtually endless options. So once you've set up your quote pricing, or you've utilized the seeded site and you've tweaked some of the quote pricing to make a bit of sense so it's relevant for your business. Obviously, we don't know your pricing. We just put in some generic numbers and let you change them. The last part to that, of course, is then how to link them. And then I'm going to show you all of this put together in a quote. So again, we're back in this settings catalog area. It's a bit you'll spend a bit of time to begin with, under this great area called styles. Nice and straightforward. Again, all this information is available in documentation. So if we have blitzed through it a little bit fast, at least you can go in with this video, open the docs and find these areas. And styles are split into two parts. To begin with, don't worry too much about ranges. I wouldn't worry about them massively, as long as you have at least one range, which is what we call a default standard range, with the most basic options to produce your products. Jobman can produce pricing for your products. So that's fine. That's all you need. Don't worry about ranges. For some companies, this is super, super handy. Basically, rather than have to produce everything in a custom format, they can have some drop-down defaults, change the pricing really quickly and easily. It's not relevant to a lot of businesses. Most manufacturers are fairly bespoke. So know that it's there, but the main thing I just want you to focus on is items and options. Now, the beautiful thing, again, about the seeded site is that we've already done the hard work. We've put in your style items, and you'll notice now the link. So the style item carcass, countertop, door, drawer guide, handle, hinge, kicker panel. These style items were the things that linked to those parts. So if we go back to that base one door as our final example, we say, okay, what was the base door one cabinet made out of? It was made of a back, two ends, a shelf. What are those? That's the carcass. So all of those components or parts were linked to the style item carcass. Easy. It has two hinges. It's linked to hinges. It has a handle. It has a door. It has a kicker, and it has a panel. And that's the link. So these are very easy to make. These are just names. But to begin with, use what's in the software, and then you'll be able to modify these from there. So these are the link to both the parts, but they're also the command in the quote itself. This is what's telling the drop-down what information I want to show when I use the drop-down. And I promise all of this will make sense in a second once we actually go into a quote. I wanted to really go backwards and run through this from end to finish so that you've got a really good understanding of where all the bits link up. Like I said, out of the box for most companies, this just works. Just go in and start producing some quoting, tweak some prices, and you're off. But it's good to know where to find this information. And then the second part is styles options. And this is where we make the final link. For my carcass, what are the options that my carcass can be made out of? And you can see here, these are my quote pricing options. So when I have a carcass, it could be whiteboard, it could be blackboard, it could be high CAD painted, it could be gloss, it could be grain. When I look at my doors, same concept. There's a lot of different options for my doors. When I look at my handles, it's the four main handle options. This list can be as big as you want it, by the way. So you can go in here and you can put in 10 different variants for your range prices in here. Not a problem. Just keep in mind, the longer the list, the bigger it's going to be available in the drop down. But that's your final link. And that's how easy it is. Now, the beauty of this link is it now means once linked, I very rarely ever have to go back into this area. If I want to change the pricing of all my products in Jobman so that every new quote I produce has an increase because my blackboard has gone up in price, I don't need to come into this area. I go into the catalog and I up the price of that quote pricing option for blackboard. And now every single quote with every product, with every part, with every component that I produce from there on in, where I choose the selection for blackboard, will have the pricing increased. And that's the efficiency of Jobman. So hopefully all that makes sense. Again, there's some good documentation around how to modify these, but our recommendation is certainly start with what's in the software, have a play, run some quotes, start backwards, change the pricing of the Overarch default first. Getting closer to what you should be, awesome. Now change the categories and operations to make a little bit more sense. Getting close, awesome. Last part, check those quote pricing options. Make sure that, if we've said whiteboard at $15 and you're paying more like $18, up the price to $18. You know what I mean? And then add those products in, see that pricing, or make some simplified products for areas where there isn't as much in the seeded sites, and just produce a couple, make a couple of style options, a couple of items, and then put into a quote, have a look at it and go, yep, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And creating these is very, very easy, as is modifying them as well. It's all of this is very intuitive. I can come in here and I can update this. Jobman will tell you what it's linked to. It'll tell you the different items all ready to go from the outset. So the final part to that, of course, is putting all that information together. So if we come in here and we look at my quote I was producing for this system and I hit update, you can now see where all this information comes together to give you really fast quoting. So you'll be able to come into the software, you'll be able to utilize those products, materials, services, and all the pricing will just start working, so that most importantly, the minute we kick off, you can start to see what your aggregate profitability will be across the board before you've even accepted the job. And this is an aggregate, keep in mind. So this is taking consideration of everything that's in the software, all the parts aggregated up. Obviously, labor operations without percentage margin for markup will impact this number, but most people would front load their materials and services, not their labor anyway. So it does make sense. And this is where we see all of that information come together. So like I said, there's 4 areas to the software right back at the beginning. We've got sections. This is a section. The advantage to sections is simply a visual tool in which to be able to break down your quotes easily from a physical set. So just think of this as a title. It might be Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, Unit 4. It might be upper, it might be lower. It might be a section might be set up so that you manufacture, like for example, if you manufacture doors, the section could be all the veneer doors. The second section could be all the metal doors. Something like that. It's basically a title to make this really easy so you know what's going on in the areas. The second part are what we call items. Think of these as areas or rooms. And the advantage of this is it's like a container. This is the standard inclusions. So this is a container telling the client, or even telling your team, what we're quoting, what area we're quoting on: kitchen, bathroom, laundry, ensuite, front fence, back fence. It could be count machinery. It could be steel tops. It could be, these areas for boating, for example, could be the deck versus the hull, versus the engine rooms versus the kitchen fit out versus the upholstery. So that's the second section, sections and then items. The third part is the components. What goes into those items? What are the parts? What are the products, the materials, the labor that will formulate this quote? And as you can see, because I produced all those products, starting to become really fast and really easy to be able to go in and produce these quotes. And the fourth part is elements. These are the things inside those products. Now, you're not going to spend a lot of time in here in quoting. This is irrelevant. This information is simply here just in case you want to see what's involved in the production of those products. And for some companies, they do like to tweak them live. The great advantage of our system is once I add a product to a quote, it will draw in all the pricing based on the information I've given it. If I make changes inside this particular product, so I come in just for this quote, and for example, I know that this is going to be quite a complicated job, and I decide to up, for example, the CNC drafting because of some curve work here. If I modify this product, it won't modify my product library. It's just changed for this quote. So you have a lot of granular control. Even though you've built this system that's designed to be automated and flexible, you do have a lot of granular control. So inside my areas or my items, I can come in here, I can add my products, and then this is that magic wheel talking about. So all of my products have heights, widths, sizes, depths. I can come in here. They're fully modifiable. This is why the system is in fact bespoke. You don't have to worry about the fact you're producing, generic products. Every single product can be changed live in the system. It'll recalculate the profit, it'll recalculate the pricing. And then the superpower of the system, is being able to change those styles quickly and easily and modify all the products inside. Now, for the majority of businesses, you will not be using ranges. You will probably utilize what we call our custom field. And here's all the information coming together. So we've got our products have parts, they have labor. And now I tell Jobman, what do you want to make it out of? And this is how, with just a handful of parts, products, doesn't even have to be hundreds of thousands. It could be, 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 products. I can very easily and quickly create massive quotes that are accurate. This is real information that uses our range pricing, and I can modify these quotes in minutes. And that's incredible. That's a big win. This information then, as I said, will go forward and it will actually do something. All of the labor components added up in this entire quote will push through the manufacturing, which we'll cover at another time. Any of the material handling inside these quotes will be there, ready to go, nice and easy. That will pull through, which will improve my purchase ordering, limit mistakes, massively improve my efficiency. But even at a base level, bringing Jobman in, taking advantage of our CRM and our lead management into our quoting, straight off the bat will start winning you more jobs, which is going to put more money in your pocket, which is not only a phenomenal return on investment for the software, but it's going to massively improve your processes going forward. And most importantly, all this information is transparent. It doesn't matter if Tracy or Callie or Billy or Jimmy or Tim are doing this quote. You can come in as the owner at any point and see what people are working on. You can see these numbers live. You can see what happens when discounts are applied. You can modify and change the product types from multiple different areas in the software. There's super fantastic inclusions. You can see that by applying 10%. Most people would think their front loading is covered, but because my labor and my operations in there can't be reduced, just because I discount the product doesn't mean it's going to take less time. You know what I mean? You can see live what impact that will have on your quote, all at your fingertips, which is phenomenal. And that in itself is one of the first superpower steps to be able to use Jobman. And then where we can take that information from there is absolutely fantastic. Now, I want to show you one last quick thing in here, just so that we go back to where we were talking before. And this is the quote templating. So the advantage of templates, like I said, is I can change the template between systems to present the information to my clients in different formats. So I've got one here, which is a very complicated quote template, which shows all the inclusions, all the breakdown in pricing, all the sizing, everything here, just to give you an idea of really what the full scope potential of this software can be. I can simplify it. You can have different templates ready to go so that I can change them at a flick of a button between different client types. So I can simplify it. I just want to show what these amounts are. The client just needs to see them, et cetera, et cetera. All of that information at my fingertips. Now, if you are looking for some help to build some professional quote templates, and we certainly do recommend, it's a great functional power in the software, please reach out to us through our support line in the help. We can put you on to a fantastic company that does some phenomenal liquid coding for our clients. And they can do templates for virtually every area of the software for you, from quoting templates to the item spec templates to forms, invoicing templates. Really, it's one of those great investments where you do it once, you pay for the templating, you've got professional templates in your system written how you want them to present, and now you have the flexibility and power to use them over and over and over again and really maximize the benefit of the software, keeping in mind that this is what your clients are going to see. This is what, when we send to them and email them, this is the information they will see. And the way it's professionally put together will obviously impact the way your clients see your business as well. So that's your quoting all put together, products, items, sections, and hopefully now you have a much better understanding of how to utilize those products, how they link to style items and components. And the last part to that is, of course, let's put all that together and very quickly and very easily make what I consider to be virtually automated quoting. And there's two sides to that. One is utilizing our CAD programs that we support to import CAD files directly into quotes and marry up products and sizes. That can give you some fast quoting, although for most companies, they wouldn't go to the length of production detailing your drawing until after the quote. So the advantage of Jobman is you can take a plan or take some information from your client, produce a fast quote, produce the estimate. Client's happy, move forward. It's now actually worth going through that process. But the second one is presets. Very easy. I don't actually need to dive into them too heavily. I just want to let you know that they're here. So under settings, under quoting, under presets, this is the way in which we can now wrap all that information together and basically turn Jobman into virtually like an Excel spreadsheet of quoting. And a preset is simply a way in which I can add products, materials, services, and labor, or I should say, all of, or some, into an area so that when I come into a quote, I can simply go, the most common standard products I quote on for this type of business is these, add the preset directly to the quote, fill out the quantities, change some sizes, apply the style item, bang, quoted. You can use presets for any manufacturing business. Even if you do not feel that products are the way to go for you when using our software, I've seen thousands of companies utilize our presets to get the same result for fast quoting. Some phenomenal examples are we have some tiny home builders and some manufacturing companies that build like dongas, for example. We have companies that build solar panel arrays. We have companies that build mining equipment, and they use presets rather than products because every job is virtually a preconditioned list of materials and labor. So I don't need to go to the length of building out products. It's like if I build this donga will have walls, it will have windows, it will have an air conditioning unit, it will have fire extinguishers. There's a bunch of inclusions we give. Bang, add the preset. There's the list, add the quantities, you're off and running. And because presets can include products, you can build some really, really, really fast templates. Now, one recommendation I will make, there's a lot of information behind a preset. So each of these presets obviously has a product, and so that product is components which are linked to parts, which are linked to style items. So my recommendation is don't make these too massive. Like don't try and make presets which have every inclusion. It's a bit like an Excel spreadsheet where you've got 2,500 lines. Like you spend all day scrolling up and down, and loading times will be impacted simply because it's so much information. Try and concentrate on the majority. Keep these nice and tight and small but usable, and you will find they will serve your company extremely well. Having about 10 or 20 items in here is perfect. Keep in mind, inside a quote, just because I've added the preset, I can still add anything into the quote. So I can add all the extra stuff. I can still add materials. I can add line items. I can add services. I can add all the extra bits into the quote live. Just because they're not on my preset doesn't matter. The preset just takes care of the majority of all the things you don't want to forget about, all the things you definitely want to happen. Bring that preset in, apply the quantities, apply the style items if relevant. Bang. Fast, efficient, profitable quoting. Super exciting. I do get very excited about the quoting side of Jobman. It's such a big, phenomenal benefit to most companies. And obviously going down the track now in the next sets of deep dive, we'll take this even further. And I'll show you now how we can take this quote that we managed to manufacture in minutes and then push that through the rest of the software to absolutely maximize the rest of the use of the software. I mean, even at step one of the problems we've solved immediately for your company is now you have your CRM management under control, you have your lead management under control. Now you're building values. You're building real reportable data to see how many people come to us each week, how many quotes are we putting together, how long are those quotes taking to put together, what are the values, and then how many are we winning. That in itself will pay for the software tenfold.